Hi, this is a video describing my experiences with Child Protective Services and how stupid and unlawful the employees and dealing with and interacting with the employees ensuing services against me. Incidentally, usually services are provided to an individual versus against an individual. Well, this agency doesn't work for services. Their only service, by the way, to begin, is taking children. They do not offer another service. I've witnessed firsthand many years dealing with the agency, and I'm also on hundreds of groups of anti-CPS concerned parents groups on social media. They all of the parents share the same experiences, that agency worker takes the child, doesn't give the child back, and there's no disclosure to parent how to get the child back. And they just take the child, and they take the to the length that the agency, and they work through the courts. They keep the child away from the parent to the time length extent that they're able to use the court system to be like, look, see, this parent doesn't care, because the child is still in state child protective services custody. So they use the court system. That's how they take the children through, um, you know, the law, that where, and they get around and they funnel the system to exclude the parent from literally all communications, disclosures of laws. And like, usually when you're arrested, you get, it's the law, right? We all heard of the Miranda rights, where you're told your rights ahead of time. um Not so with this agency. And so the other thing about it is the workers themselves. So from my experience, from my witness, and what I've extracted information from dealing with it, obvious, and my observance, that they do it for money. I don't know another reason why they would abduct children, separate children from their homes, from their parents. And from what I've read, and it is law, that they receive money for separating children from their homes and from their parents, because that is the only service they provide. I've not heard that they provide another service. So up until 2018, actually, before the Family First Act was passed under the Donald Trump administration, they got a phenomenal amount of money. I'm not 100% sure how much, for providing services. Not only they have like a level system for receiving money, for providing services, and then for separating, for removing children from homes, and then from successfully adopting children where there's a foster care parent awaiting to take the child, to have the child, take it away from its parents. um and somehow the foster parent gets paid also. Not only does the foster parent get paid from the foster care agency, and once the child is adopted out, they keep getting money for the rest of the child's life until the child stays it gets reaches age 18. So anyway, because I've talked to some of the workers are not 100% evil, and they disclose the information. And I've talked to former caseworkers that used to work at the agency and actually got their social worker's license just to find out what goes on at this place and get hired there. And their testament was they get bonuses for removing children, for adopting children out. And um I have actually looked up state law, and I cannot remember which title it was, but it the statute stated that the agency has to give a certain amount a certain amount of children must receive services in order for the agency to receive money from the county. And then they had a separate law that said the same thing for younger children, infants. And so that's just for the county to receive funding from the county. They have a separate funding from the federal government for and for based on how much services they provide. Obviously, over a length of time, they keep getting money. They get more and more money, you know what I'm saying, as the child goes through point in the system of services. Since since the Family First Act of 2018 was passed, I can't find that law anymore. So the law has changed under the Donald Trump administration, where part of this law did require that and provide that the agency workers not receive as much money for services and for removing children from their homes. If you read the law, it's taken from the Social Security Act. So, and that's what it's just kind of it kind of reframes the Social Security Act. And it's written kind of broadly, but I understand it does emphasize that part of the enactment of this act, that the workers are going to be retrained under this new system, along with the lawyers, public defender. They're not called that, but they're called family law lawyers, that are provided by the court, because the agency uses the administrative family courts to basically run over the parents and the family, but as far as my impressions, where I don't know why anyone would want to take children from parents in a family that they lawfully belong to. From what I've witnessed, after I begged, basically, in tears half the time, for my child. Can I have my child? Please give me my child. What do you want for you to return my child to me? And I'm basically laughed at throughout the whole scenario. I'm laughed at in the court house, and the only other component that I can imagine why someone would either want to do that or does successfully get away with it and sleeps at night is a practicer of witchcraft. And and in saying that, it's either money or witchcraft, because at one point, after I was laughed out the courthouse to my face, um you know, just to have my rights, my child, I got an attitude with it, and I saw that component of, they respect fire. Other than that, it's money, the hierarchy, and when something worships a hierarchy system, a system of money, a system of numbers and fire, well, you have no God, so I cannot speak on your behalf because that is not mine. I do not worship that. I worship one. I worship the Lord. Um, and caseworkers, and but looking, that there's different levels of Satanists. You've got because you've got your caseworkers, right, that are oftentimes bumbling, baffling idiots. They have no idea what's going on, that they have no idea that the sky is up and it's blue, and uh and then you have your lawyers and your judges, where they're very endowed with knowledge. um but for the caseworkers, look up your caseworkers. None of mine were licensed in a profession. If you look up licensed professionals for your state, odds are they're not licensed. I had 10 caseworkers. 1 out of 10 had a license in a single profession. I had so many because they kept leaving. Like, they would hire them and then they would leave. Because what I know is some of them are human, and the humans don't last very long at Child Protective Services. There's a reason, because those with a soul cannot tolerate, they can't hang with a system that abducts kids from parents and families. And so they leave, and then they get replaced right away. But if you go to your state board of licensed professionals, just Google it, and all of the licensed professionals are listed at one site. So usually a caseworker would be a social worker, licensed social worker, and then you type in their name, and whatever information it asks tells you the status of their professional licensure, and that part, which is interesting. But the attorneys and the judges, they're a little bit more sheer-headed through the fire to an extent, which was put bluntly. But the Bible speaks largely on the issue putting your children through the fire, speaks against the false God worshippers that put their children through the fire. And it's actually the basis for the entire Old Testament in the Holy Bible, where Well, I mean, it's where to begin. It's from start to finish where, um, Moses led the nation out of the land of Egypt, out of bondage to their own land and nation, and describes what took place wandering in the desert, where the nation of many the people of the nation of Israel wandered through the desert for 40 years. And they witnessed miracles, and where food would just appear in fields overnight, in front of them, where they had nothing the day before, and or water would just appear from a rock, and they question, is Moses sane? Look what he's done to us. We don't have what we need. We miss the creature comforts of Egypt, where they had meat, and things like that. That it literally describes that, and the meat would just appear, or but and then how the wars ensued, and that is the other basis of the Old Testament. It was just based around describing the wars between the nation, and the nation of Israel being considered the chosen people of God. And they would and wars would ensue, where the Lord gave the people privilege and signs to destroy the false god worshippers, and that and where they worshipped idols and false gods. And it further describes how the at one point a false god worshipper king ruled the nation after King David, who was the nation's second ever king that was elected to be king over the nation. One of his descendants inadvertently allowed, or didn't allow, but made a false move, so to speak, and it let a false god worshipping king to rule the nation. And that's described in the chapters 2 Kings and Chronicles. Those chapters describe that. And the nation was taken over for generations by false god worshipping kings. And the nation became enslaved within their own land. And how they were able to take the nation back, where so basically it was the men of God, prophets, and they called them seers also. Eventually they were able to break the system down, and they through many tenure of generation of good men, because it was hard to kind of find a good man in those days because of all of the indoctrination that the false god worshipping king put onto and formed over the nation of Israel. And so through a tenure of generations of good men, they eventually got the nation back to being a nation of God's chosen people. And that's that's another topic a bit about the Holy Bible, and where it describes how God, the Lord, all he asked, all he asked of his people that were his chosen people, thing that he asked was for them to obey his statutes, judgments, and commandments, and to love the Lord with all of your heart, mind, and soul and body. So yeah, and with Child Protective Services, though, and I feel like I'm still on a rant about it. I feel like they worship the monetary and number system to the point where they're not even looking at it objectively anymore, and it's like they're there for the money and the fire. And basically, after if you can imagine, after somebody does it long enough and is employed by that system, works by that system openly, freely, and takes on, else to describe it, they're asking for it, literally. They just want whoever is going to get the money, whoever's after they get the fire, suer gets sued. That's really the game they're playing. Let's let the lawsuits ensue. My motto. And that's become my motto now as well, as it were. Oh, and the other part where, well, with the laws that govern this agency also, by the way, where it said that they have to get a certain amount of children or they won't get money from the county. And it didn't say in my state law that I found that in, it didn't say exactly how many children that they have to put through the system at one time in order to continue funding. But they have their own, they had a separate set of rules that further describes, I'm sure it's a certain amount of the populace, of the county populace, that would need to be in the system to get the money. And it's just like any company that is run under laws, and where all companies, all organizations that receive money are run by laws, state laws, laws that are made by our legislators. Because, and here's the reason why they all kind of run under the same system, because of the Federal Reserve. Because if something receives money under the Federal Reserve, it's all run under it, legally, it's all run under the same Federal Reserve system, whether it's a Child Protective Services Agency or whether it's a Quickie Mart. And so, to reiterate what I've said in other videos I made, Child Protective Services is not a government agency. It is a private corporation. So you can see how they get around the laws through, by and large, ignorance. If they just find people off the street, they don't, does somebody off the street understand law? If you present, in other words, when you present, when you present a caseworker, even a director, I don't know that person understands the law. Clearly they haven't looked it up. If when I present them a legally prepared written notice stating my requirements and wishes for the return of my children, but they ignore the notice, well, that's how you know they don't know the law, because the law states, first of all, there's different tiers of the law. When you look up state contract or procurement codes for your state, there's an outline of rules that must be followed once the parent gives first the head contracting officer, and preferably also you always have to give the director of the agency notice. They have to do certain things. If not, they have to listen to if not, and ultimately they have to follow the instructions that are in the notice that you gave the agency, or they're breaking, not only that they're breaking your own laws. You see what I mean? How the state law, it's aligned with your United States constitutional rights, where that would, when they don't listen to state law, well, they're violating your personal 14th Amendment, right? And they're violating the ninth Equal Protection Clause under the 9th and the 14th Amendment. So, but anyways, you can look that up in case laws, state this, reiterate that that fact in those laws. But yeah, not to get too in depth in it, I'm just complaining. If you look up Mel Janelle Save Our Children Truth Commission, or me, I want to direct people to the help as well. They're helping parents get their kids, and they're online, and they're under Parents Voice, and they're on Facebook as well. Parents Voice on YouTube. Yeah, and they help with the litigation process when parents go pro se litigant and all that. A lot of helpful tips she gives. I really suggest people sign up their email to receive emails.